Every night as I lay in my bed, the soft rustling sounds from the house next door would fill my ears. It was a peculiar melody, a symphony of creaking floorboards and distant murmurs that never seemed to end. At first, I dismissed it as the quirks of an old house settling into the night. But as the days turned into weeks, I began to question the source of those unsettling noises. My curiosity got the better of me, and I found myself staring out of my window into the dark abyss of my neighbor's home. The lights were always dim, casting eerie shadows that danced across the curtains. There was something off about the whole situation, something that sent shivers down my spine. One stormy evening, as thunder rumbled in the distance, I couldn't ignore the feeling of unease any longer. With a flashlight in hand, I sneaked through the yard and approached my neighbor's house. The front door was slightly ajar, as if inviting me to explore its secrets. I hesitated for a moment, the raindrops splattering against my skin like cold fingertips. With a deep breath, I stepped inside. The air was heavy with the scent of dampness and decay. Every step I took echoed through the dimly lit corridor, as if the house itself was watching my intrusion. The walls seemed to close in around me, and a sense of foreboding settled deep within my chest. As I ventured deeper, I stumbled upon a staircase leading to the basement. The wooden steps groaned beneath my weight, as if protesting my descent into the unknown. The basement was shrouded in darkness, save for the feeble beam of my flashlight. The air was musty, and the atmosphere was suffocatingly still. And then I heard it, a faint, guttural whisper that seemed to emerge from the very walls. My heart raced, and I aimed my flashlight at the source of the sound. My breath caught in my throat as I saw a shadowy figure huddled in the corner, its eyes reflecting the pale light like twin orbs of malevolence. My rational mind urged me to run, to escape the suffocating terror that gripped me. But an inexplicable force kept me rooted to the spot, my curiosity melding with an overwhelming dread that I couldn't shake. As I approached the figure cautiously, its features came into focus. It was a man, his clothes tattered and his eyes vacant. His voice trembled as he muttered incoherent phrases, the words dripping with anguish. The symbols on the walls surrounding him seemed to writhe, as if alive with their own sinister purpose. And then he turned to me, his hollow gaze locking onto mine. "Help me," he pleaded, his voice a mere whisper that reverberated through my very soul. Before I could react, a bone-chilling wind swept through the basement, extinguishing my flashlight. Darkness enveloped me, and a palpable sense of terror gripped my being. I fumbled for my phone, my trembling fingers barely managing to illuminate the room. But the man was gone. The symbols on the walls seemed to glow with an otherworldly light, casting eerie shadows that danced across the room. A cacophony of whispers echoed in my ears, a symphony of voices from beyond the veil of reality. With every ounce of courage, I stumbled back up the basement stairs and burst out of the house. Rain soaked my clothes, and my heart raced as if trying to escape the horrors I had witnessed. The house next door loomed like a malevolent specter, its secrets unveiled to my unwilling eyes. As I write this account, I can still hear those whispers in the night, their haunting refrain a reminder of the unspeakable truth I stumbled upon. My neighbor's house was a gateway to a realm of darkness, a place where the boundaries between the living and the dead are blurred. And though I've tried to erase the memories from my mind, the echoes of that fateful night continue to haunt me, an indelible mark on my sanity. I moved my family into a charming house on a quiet suburban street, seeking a fresh start in a new neighborhood. The neighbors seemed friendly enough, and the kids were excited about the move. It all started out like a dream, until those letters arrived. One evening, as I sat in the living room reading a book, a light thud on the doormat caught my attention. I picked up the envelope and noticed that it was addressed to the new family. Oddly, there was no return address. Curiosity piqued, I tore it open to find a neatly typed letter inside. Dear new family. I hope you're enjoying your new home. Your daughter's ballet lessons seem to be going well, and your son's love for soccer is quite evident from the goalpost in the backyard. I must say, your taste in gardening is impeccable, especially the roses by the entrance. As for your morning routine, your wife's love for yoga and your preference for black coffee are quite fascinating. My heart raced as I read the letter. My mind raced with questions. How did this stranger know so much about us? Was it some sort of prank? I showed the letter to my wife, Sarah, who was equally unnerved. We decided to dismiss it as a bizarre coincidence, but the feeling of being watched lingered. Days turned into weeks, and more letters arrived. Each contained eerily accurate details about our lives. Our skepticism waned as the letters described things only someone inside our home would know. One evening, as we were all sitting down for dinner, I heard a faint rustling outside. I peered through the window just in time to see a shadow darting away. With a racing heart, I burst out the front door and into the yard. There was no sign of anyone. I looked back at the house, my unease growing. It felt like we were being watched, like a sinister eye was fixed on our every move. The letters continued, their tone shifting from observational to threatening. I see you, one read. Another warned, you can't escape me. Sarah and I were consumed by paranoia, our every interaction tinged with suspicion. Our children, once excited about their new home, now stayed indoors, fearing the unseen menace lurking in the shadows. We decided to involve the police, but without concrete evidence, there was little they could do. Our obsession with uncovering the writer's identity consumed us. We installed security cameras, triple-checked locks, and even hired a private investigator. But no matter how hard we looked, we found nothing. Sleepless nights turned into dread-filled days. We grew distant from each other, the constant tension taking its toll. Then, one evening, as I was sorting through the latest batch of letters, a chilling realization hit me. The descriptions of our lives in the letters were growing more accurate. It was as if the writer was not just observing us, but controlling us. Terrified, I confronted Sarah with my theory. As we pored over the letters together, we realized that they seemed to dictate our actions and decisions. The writer knew our routines, our fears, and our weaknesses. We were being manipulated. Determined to break free, we hatched a plan. We would ignore the letters, refuse to be controlled by this unseen neighbor any longer. It wasn't easy, but as we distanced ourselves from the letter's instructions, we began to feel a glimmer of empowerment. Days turned into weeks without any new letters arriving. The house felt quieter, the shadows less menacing. Our children started to venture outside again, and Sarah and I began to rebuild the bond that had been strained by fear. The sense of being watched slowly faded. But just as we began to believe it was over, I woke up one morning to find a single letter on our doorstep. Trembling, I opened it, half expecting another barrage of threats. Instead, the message was simple and chilling. I'll always be here, watching. Desperation led us to a painful decision, to leave our home behind, the one place where we had hoped to find happiness. We sold the house, packed our belongings, and moved to a new place far away. The letters, it seemed, had finally stopped. As we settled into our new home, the weight of the unseen neighbor began to lift. The air was fresher, the atmosphere lighter. Our children regained their joy, and Sarah and I found a sense of relief we hadn't experienced in a long time. But even as we tried to rebuild our lives, a nagging thought remained, a fear that the entity might find us again, that its reach extended beyond the confines of a single house. We realized that we could never truly escape its clutches. And so, as we looked back at the house we had left behind, we knew that the scars of our encounter with the unseen neighbor would forever haunt us. The memory of its chilling presence would always linger, a reminder of the malevolent force that could not be shaken off with distance or time. Our battle might have ended in retreat, but the war against the unseen had left its mark on our souls, a constant reminder that evil can lurk even in the most ordinary of places. And as we walked away from the past, we could only hope that the nightmare we had endured would remain locked behind us, forever concealed in the shadows. The quiet suburb I had moved to was the epitome of peacefulness, well-manicured lawns, friendly neighbors, and a sense of security that lulled me into a false sense of calm. Little did I know that beneath the veneer of tranquility, a nightmare was waiting to be unraveled. It started innocently enough. My neighbor, Mr. Thompson, was an unassuming man in his late 40s, always offering a polite nod or a small smile when our paths crossed. But something about his demeanor set off a nagging feeling deep within me, an instinct that whispered that things were not what they seemed. As days turned into weeks, peculiar observations piled up. Late at night, I'd glimpse Mr. Thompson carrying heavy, suspicious-looking bags into his garage. I would catch him staring out his window for hours, as if he were watching for something, or someone. My imagination ran wild, painting him as a shadowy figure with a hidden life. Doubt gnawed at me, eating away at my sanity. I found myself researching notorious serial killers, comparing their habits and patterns to Mr. Thompson's behavior. I was teetering on the edge of obsession, caught between my fear and my curiosity. Every odd detail only fueled my suspicion further. One day, as I was tending to my garden, a stray cat dashed into Mr. Thompson's yard. I froze as I saw him approach the cat, his face unreadable. A chill ran down my spine as he crouched down and gently coaxed the cat towards him. With a sudden, swift movement, Mr. Thompson's hands shot out, closing around the cat's throat. The air seemed to constrict in my own lungs as I saw his fingers tighten, his expression unchanging as the struggling cat clawed at his hands. My heart pounding, I decided to dig deeper. Late at night, under the cover of darkness, I began to observe his movements. I watched as he meticulously cleaned his car, wiping down every inch. It was then that I noticed an eerie pattern. Each time he cleaned his car, news of a missing person would surface in the media. Days turned into sleepless nights as my investigation intensified. My mind became a labyrinth of theories, each more terrifying than the last. Every shred of evidence pointed to the unthinkable, a serial killer living right next door. I knew I had to take action, but I felt helpless, a mere spectator in a horror story that was unfolding before my eyes. The weight of my suspicions pressed down on me until I could bear it no longer. Gathering my courage, I approached the local police with my findings. Their skepticism was evident, but they promised to look into it. I left the station with a mixture of relief and anxiety, knowing that I had set a chain of events in motion that could lead to the truth, or disaster. Days passed, each moment an agonizing wait. I became a prisoner to my fear, a puppet to my obsession. And then, one night, as I lay in bed, I heard the distant wails of sirens piercing the silence. My heart raced as I stared at the ceiling, unable to shake the feeling that those sirens were meant for Mr. Thompson. I rushed to my window and saw the flashing lights illuminating his house. Officers swarmed the property, their grim expressions confirming my worst fears. My hands trembled as I watched them lead Mr. Thompson out of his house in handcuffs, his face a mask of guilt and despair. It was over. My gut feeling, my obsessive research, all of it had been right. Mr. Thompson was a serial killer, and I had been living next door to unimaginable horror. As the truth sank in, I felt a mix of relief and terror. The realization that my instincts had saved lives was a comfort, but the proximity to such darkness was a scar that would never fade. The neighborhood that had once felt like a haven was now tainted by the memory of the horrors that had transpired behind closed doors. Every neighbor I saw, every friendly smile exchanged, held a hidden darkness that I would forever be haunted by. And as I looked out at the place that had once seemed so peaceful, I couldn't help but wonder what other secrets it might still hold, waiting to be uncovered.